Welcome back. I'm Henry and it's day 27. Last night, it's Friday by the way, happy Friday. Last night we were discussing Erich Fromm's The Art of Loving book. The Art of Loving. And how the West has disintegrated love. How people create these personality packages and they try to get a fair bargain on the market. But we have this feeling, the deep feeling of being alone, loneliness. And we try to remain consciously unaware of it by working long hours, and when we're not working, we fill up our time with amusements and entertainment and activities. Everybody's schedules are full, so that we don't have to think about this separateness. Everybody's ultra independent, ultra separate, ultra alone. And so people in the West, or the West has taught everyone that love is kind of an extension of capitalism. How we handle our work and commerce is how we should handle love. This exchange, the teamwork, smooth functioning team. It's like the team at the job, semi-independent, collaborative, things like that, but ambitious and aggressive. So it's not working. It's not working. And so yesterday's video was about the disintegration of it. So I highly recommend you watch it if you haven't. What we're going to talk about today, with the help of Erich Fromm from The Art of Loving, is what is the condition for love? How can we have the ability to love? Because it's not what everybody thinks. We all go by our feeling, right? You know when you feel love, and I don't even know if a lot of that feeling is truly love. It can be confused with other kinds of feelings, but real love is what we're going to talk about, as it's explained in this book, Art of Loving. So he says that the main condition for achievement of love is overcoming one's own narcissism. I'm talking about the levels of narcissism that most or all of us have. I'm not talking about the extreme pathological, but everybody's got healthy and some amount of unhealthy narcissism. So he's saying that the main condition is overcoming one's narcissism, this orientation where one experiences as real only that which exists within oneself, while the outside world has no reality in itself, but it's only experienced from the viewpoint of either being useful or dangerous. So narcissism, so it's basically like a self-centered outlook or view, perspective. And the opposite pole, the opposite of narcissism, is objectivity. To be able to see people and things as they are, objectively, and to be able to separate this objective picture from the picture that we form by our own desires and fears. And he also says that all of us, because he's talking about the narcissism that we all possess, but he also says that all of us are more or less insane, more or less asleep. And we have an unobjective view of the world, which is distorted by our narcissistic orientation. Now, there are so there are also cognitive distortions that are interrelated with what people usually discuss or think about in narcissism, right? Healthy narcissism, positive sense of self-worth, self-acceptance, pride in one's abilities, motivation to pursue goals, healthy narcissism. Everybody needs that. But there's a boundary where any of these can be crossed and become unhealthy. So grandiosity, excessive need for admiration, lack of empathy, exploitation, antagonism. So it's a tendency to self-enhance or view oneself in an exaggerated way, right? So that's what we're talking about. And then cognitive distortions. I really wanted to bring this in, even though he doesn't cover this at all in his book, but I think it's very important to understand what those are. So cognitive distortions are like, I can't even find this here, but it's like all or nothing thinking, black or white thinking, looking at, let's see, somebody is being all bad or all good. Anyway, we'll come back to that. So he says that the faculty to think objectively is reason. The emotional attitude behind reason is that of humility. So we can only use reason when we've achieved an attitude of humility. And as you know, being humble is being modest, open, self-aware, respectful. So love being dependent on I'm reading what he's saying, love being dependent on the relative absence of narcissism requires the development of humility, objectivity, and reason. So humility, and then to be able to see others objectively as they are, not through the lens of our fears and desires and so on. So he continues, waking up. Okay, so the second to that, he was saying that this process of emergence, of birth, of waking up, being objective, being humble, being reasonable, requires one quality as a necessary condition, and that quality is faith. But it's not the faith that you're thinking of. It's not a religious faith. It's a rational faith. It's not a belief in something. It's the quality of certainty and firmness that our convictions have. So that's and I'm going to explain to you why that's important. Because when I first heard that from him, I was a little bit confused. I didn't know how he's going to tie this all in, but it's very important. He says having faith, and he discusses this in great length. I've just only taken some excerpts out. He says having faith in another person means to be certain of the reliability and unchangeability of their attitudes, of the core of their personality, of their love. So he contrasts this with, like, people can change opinions, but their basic motivations remain the same. Like, for example, the respect for life and human dignity, these do not change. So in the same sense, we have faith in ourselves. So what does that mean? We're aware of the existence of a self, a core in our personality that's unchangeable and persists throughout our life, in spite of various circumstances. And regardless of whether we have changes in opinions and feeling, it's the core, that this is the I, when we say I. And if we don't have faith in the persistence of ourself, he says, our identity is threatened and we become dependent on other people, whose approval then becomes the basis of our identity. That sounds like narcissism. Only the person who has faith in himself is able to be faithful to others. Now that is a great point. If you have faith in the core of yourself, in the unchanging nature of that core, then you can have faith in others. So, and he describes this in more detail by saying that you can be sure that you will be the same, only this person can be sure that they will be the same at a future time as they are today. And then that this person will feel and act as they now expect to feel and act, right? It's this consistency, this constancy of the self. And that's why, like Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche mentioned in the past that he's a philosopher from 100 or more years ago, 150 years ago, that faith is, a man or woman can be defined by their capacity to promise. So if you can make a promise, a long-term promise someone, it's because you have faith in yourself, that something is remaining constant, it's steady, it's not changeable, your core in yourself. So he says what matters in relation to love is the faith in one's own love, in its ability to produce love in others and in its reliability. Very interesting. So faith in one's own love. He continues, he builds on that. He says to have faith requires courage, the ability to take risk, even to accept pain and disappointment. So if somebody instead insists on safety and security for life, they cannot have faith. So that person would have to shut themselves off and defend themselves, keep a distance. In order to keep themselves secure, they become a prisoner. So to love and to be loved needs courage. And to take a jump and stake everything on these values. That's very true. And we're coming up here on an important point that he makes with regard to this. So he says that the first step is to notice where and when one loses faith, to look through the rationalizations which are used to cover up this loss of faith. We do try to rationalize why we think and do the things we do. Even though we know that they're wrong and they sound wrong, we try to rationalize them, but the truth is there. So we use rationalizations to cover up this loss of faith, to recognize where one acts in a cowardly way. Wow. So one will also recognize that while one is consciously afraid of not being loved, the real unconscious fear is that of loving. So one is consciously afraid of not being loved, but they're also unconsciously afraid of loving. And that love is an act of faith. And whoever is of little faith is also of little love. That's great. So what he's saying, he built up to these, he spoke of a few other qualities before this, in terms of listening and things like this. All these qualities or traits you'd expect to hear in someone teaching you how to love. But these are the two paramount things that he concludes with is you have to be objective, not narcissistic. You have to be humble. And you have to have faith. These are really, really good points that I never expected to hear. If you're interested in learning more, you can pick up his book. It's The Art of Loving. This is 1956. So it's just as relevant today as it ever was. And I'm surprised we're not getting this kind of quality online today. So please leave a comment if you have something you'd like to share. I'd like to hear from you, your feedback, what your experience has been, and especially as it relates to these things, is about seeing other people as they are, for who they are, not through your own lens of fears, desires, and things like that, but really to know a person as they are. I think it's very profound. And then also to have faith, to not be afraid to love and put yourself out there, because you can be hurt, but I don't know how you can, I think you'd be missing out on a huge aspect of life. One of the greatest things in life is to love and to be loved. So that's day 27, and I want to wish you a creative thought and effortful action. These are two things that have been with me for the last few weeks. Creative thought and effortful action. And I think if you have any emotions or anything that you're dealing with in life that brings up strong emotions, if you can channel that into these two things, creative thought and effortful action, I think it's wonderful. So please join me on the next day's discussion. Stay tuned to find out what it is, and please like and subscribe.